Oh, but it gets worse and it gets weirder, my friends. Check this out in the National Post. This is a great story. Canadian veterans of People's Liberation Army form association, sing of China's martial glory. Oh, is this some story from China? No, this is a story from Toronto. Members of the Canada Chinese Veterans Society like to gather and pay homage to the forces that crushed the Tiananmen Square protests in Canada. So they're doing this in Canada. The Chinese Communist veterans, the ones driving the tanks, they're getting together to celebrate the good time, like when they rolled over the democracy protesters in Tiananmen Square. The guys in the tanks are celebrating here. This picture, this is not from China. This is from Richmond Hill, just north of Toronto. Other pictures in this great story. Congrats to the National Post. Give them credit. Pictures with the Chinese flag, picture practicing the Chinese military marching. This is from Canada. That's not just the Chinese flag. That's the People's Liberation Army. That's the army, by the way, the Canadian soldiers fought against in Korea. They're dressed in the uniform of China's, let me read this, dressed in the uniform of China's People's Liberation Army, the 40 or so singers stood proudly in neat rows and belted out an old favorite. I am a soldier talks of defeating the Japanese, vanquishing nationalist leader Chiang Kai-shek in the Communist Revolution, and being tested by the Revolutionary War. The performance brought forth a whirlwind of Chinese military spirit in a foreign land, said a report on the concert. This recital, earlier this month at the Center for Performing Arts in Richmond Hill, Ontario, was not offered by a visiting martial choir from Beijing. It was the work of a surprising new Canadian association dedicated to retired troops of the Canadian people, China's People's Liberation Army, or PLA, China's armed forces, who are now settled in this country. I'm not going to read the end of the story, but it goes on in this vein. It's fascinating. I recommend the story. Let me read just a couple final paragraphs, okay? In a free country, the society members have every right to commemorate their military backgrounds and retain a fondness for their country of origin, noted Christian Luprecht, a political science professor at RMC. But if you take on Canadian citizenship, then you sign up for a certain loyalty to our country, and particularly loyalty to our values, our way of life, he said. What country are you talking about, Professor? That may be incompatible with proud membership in a veterans group whose military reports directly to the Chinese Communist Party and contributes to instability domestically and internationally, said Luprecht. Wang, a Beijing native whose Tiananmen book, Inconvenient Memories, was published in May, suggested the leaders of the veterans group are likely China loyalists, while some other members may simply feel nostalgic for their youth. But even casual participation cannot be justified, she argued. We all said our oath of citizenship, said Wang, who came to Canada in 2006. The moment we became a Canadian, we swore to be loyal to our adopted country and abandon our loyalty to the home country. If they are permanent residents, I suggest the government take this record into consideration when they apply for citizenship. I'm sorry. I love that. I love that. Do you think any immigrants have to take a values test before Justin Trudeau admits them to Canada as citizens? I mean, Quebec is taking baby steps talking about that now, but they won't cover this. Loyalty to a communist military regime. In Canada, immigrants don't even have an in-person interview anymore. And imagine anyone thinking that Justin Trudeau, of all people, would bring in such a values test and against Chinese communists, of all people. Heck, I'm surprised that Trudeau didn't invite this team of communist war veterans to have a special delegation to those military games in China last week. I'm surprised Trudeau didn't dress up as a Chinese soldier himself for Halloween last night. That's an excerpt from the Ezra Levant Show, which is a show I do every day. I do a...
Good afternoon, YouTube. Good afternoon, my fellow Canadians. All levity aside, because really, I love the Rebel News. And Ezra Levant, that's not important. What I don't like is that most of the time they're trying to be entertaining about subjects that are extremely serious and dangerous for our country, and there's no need to joke about such things. Let's talk more about China. I did a video not so long ago on the propaganda parade on the Chinese 70th anniversary. And then I did an article condemning the defense minister Harjit Sajjan for attending a rally, let's call it, or a party, glorifying Chinese communism under Mao. And I will remind again, although I'm sure that my viewers are highly educated enough to know it already, 100 million people died under Mao that we know of. But the figure could be inaccurate. It could be much higher. And it's not that Mao killed just 100 million people. It's the fact that Mao killed his own people. Communism eating itself. It's the country in which it's involved in. I just want to talk to you a little bit more about why I find Canada supporting this kind of behavior extremely reprehensible and inappropriate for a country that's supposed to be adopting Western values of freedom, of democracy. Canada, its identity is for peacekeeping, right? When I look in my past in this country growing up, our reputation abroad has always been about peacekeeping and about freedom. Now, what is wrong with this is that China is so blatantly ignoring the sovereignty and freedom of countries that surrounds it and instead is trying to annex them quietly. Take Vietnam, for example. The Communist Party in Vietnam is actually by extension ruled by the Chinese, Red China, they call it, and has installed a dictatorship in Vietnam by the power of the bullet, or money, or women, but one of those things. If you cannot fall under their control, their corruption, they kill you. You are eliminated. This is why it's so important to remember the severity of communism itself, and that today it is still very much alive, but has hidden itself underneath the guise of democracy. That's why, underneath the guise of red capitalism. That's why I call it red capitalism. It's communism hidden, controlled by Red China. And the veteran society glorifying the forces that killed students in Tiananmen Square is absolutely disgusting to me. And I think even amongst Chinese, there must be a great deal of disgust for this kind of behavior. Imagine they're practicing marching and glorify. I forget where exactly the point is. I'll find it for you. Here. It is absolutely unacceptable that this kind of behavior can occur in Canada, to glorify a country that murdered innocent people, but not exactly the country, the party, the Communist Party that killed innocent people. Communism as an ideal. And you see here the Canadian flag is off to the side, but really the whole party is designed to glorify Red China, red capitalism, and communism under Mao. It is, I look at it, the Canadians are losing their identity in this time. The fact that Ezra talks about checking immigrants for value testing and so on, and I've spoken to many immigrants that moved to this country that are disappointed at the fact that there isn't a more patriotic theme. Essentially, you come in, you don't have to know the national anthem, for starters, to speak the country's languages and so on. Like these are just ideas and points that I want to bring to your attention. I want to know more about this issue, actually, because I feel that it's shrouded within the bureaucracy of the system, and that it should be scrutinized and ultimately changed to something that gives Canada more of its identity back. The number one thing that I feel we should be as Canadians is we should feel gratitude to Canada for what we have, the freedom in which we enjoy. Even stuff like this, I condemn it, but it is their right to do in this country. They practice it freely, even to support a communist regime that murdered people. So that is our freedom we enjoy, taken advantage of. So why? Why is it happening? The Canadian identity disappearing, the country splintered, fractured, whatever you want to call it. We're completely divided and not uniting in a cause, let's say. And that cause is the Canadian identity. Canadian, what's the future for this country? If this is the kind of thing, it occurs small, but mark me, this will become much, much bigger in time. Then what's left of the original Canada as we know it? These groups are only tasting how powerful they can become in the future. They will become very powerful. I guarantee it, unless something happens to change the current course we're on. But again, I reiterate, this is not something to laugh at and dismiss out of hand lightly. Veterans groups, that Canadian soldiers and so on, or pardon me, the Chinese Communist Party that Canadian soldiers themselves have fought against. Right? That communist idea has no place here. Canada is not built on communism. Canada don't support communism as it exists because it destroys people's lives. Right? Literally ending people's lives. I look at Vietnam, I want to go back to it for a moment, that the Chinese poisoned the Bien Dong River and caused cancer and other disease for the Vietnamese people that are living off that river. You can't even drink the water. It's so contaminated with toxins from Chinese factories. And they make fake food as well. The Vietnamese have to eat it and it create disease. Essentially, their lifespan's cut in half. They die young. These are Vietnamese people living in this time. How can it be that it occurred? I never say that the Vietnamese people adopted communism because that was their choice. A lot of the time, the fact that government is in power is by force, by the power of the bullet. I tell you that Vietnamese people will be the victims of China in the future. Perhaps Chinese will swallow them. And it's terrible because they tried to rebel peacefully. The Vietnamese already had a very nice peaceful protest. What happened to them? Many of them were arrested and killed. Or killed on the spot. This is the legacy of what is happening now with Chinese. Red China. I do not blame all Chinese, but I blame the Communist Party of Chinese. That dark power from Beijing. Beware of that kind of thing. There's nothing to be making fun, as the Ezra Levant has put it. I would not approach the topic the same way he does, because I already have quite a bit of knowledge what they're doing just to Vietnam alone. I love the people of Vietnam. It cannot be that Canada should be there helping them to be free. The US should be there to help them to be free. They did not choose communism, I tell you. The Chinese installed communist puppets in their party. And for those that they couldn't buy off, they intimidate by death, or they try to pay with women or extravagant amount of money to corrupt the officials. But they bought them off or they killed them, I tell you. That is the reality that exists. That's why we cannot let them have foothold here. Even something like this is a very dangerous event. I'm sure that the Chinese, the genuine Chinese immigrant that come here to make a new life for themselves, they don't support this, I'm sure. Why would they move here otherwise? They come here to start a fresh life, a good life, freedom here. To express and make things beautiful for themselves, for their family. That is what Canada is at its core. We embrace anybody who comes from all over the world to seek to live in peace, to build a life for themselves here. We embrace those people. We try to help refugees. We try to remain peacekeepers abroad. This is what Canada used to stand for in the past and should remain doing. But they've lost their way, their identity with this government. And it turns out that everything they're doing create a lot of confusion and undermine the fabric of the society we enjoy today. And it will slowly but surely disappear, mark my words. There's nothing more to be said about it except that I cannot understand for the life of me why it is not more paid attention to. So with that, I thank you for your time and attention. My fellow Canadians, we're living in a time of great sorrow, I tell you. It's no joke. I thank you for your time and attention. Goodbye.